Right, welcome now to our panel session. We were going to retitle this as Bollocks to Brexit, Let's Talk FAANG. But I don't think people like us putting bollocks on the screen, so we're stuck with this. How can the UK TV industry work with the FAANGs? Is it about competition or collaboration or both? So the good news is we have a wonderful panel of diverse interest, I would say, who are going to answer this and a variety of other questions. Let's get them each to introduce themselves and just give us a sense of what they're doing with the FAANGs and whether on balance you're seeing these companies as competitors or collaborators. Janine.
Hi, I'm Janine. I'm the head of digital entertainment at ITV, which means I look after digital exploitation across all platforms of our kind of big programme brands. Our relationship with FAANGs, to coin a Facebook term, is complicated. We have many different parts of our business, so we're not only a massive UK commercial broadcaster, but we're also a huge global production company. So you can probably understand that both those parts of the business have different needs, wants, and opportunities from FAANGs. So that makes the position of ITV a difficult one. They're also a carrier of our ITV hub on Apple TV, for example, and things like that. So that's another different kind of relationship. And also there's a competitive relationship for revenue, as always. So we are, I would say, finding our way through this. It changes all the time, as you know. We're launching new things with different platforms, with different types of relationships. And I think it will continue to change. And there's not one fixed way of doing it right now. But yeah, it's complicated.
And I mean, from that, I take it that the relationship is definitely not settled.
Absolutely
it's still
not.
developing.
No, it's still developing, and we'll continue to do so, you know, because new things come up at their side. We launch new initiatives, new products, new strategy, new funding for programmes internationally. And there's a perception issue too, you know, which we might talk about later, but it's different from brand to brand.
I'm sure we'll come back to that. James, I'm guessing your situation is even more complicated.
I guess potentially in the detail, but in principle it's not too dissimilar. We compete with some of the FAANGs in some revenue streams, but I think we probably err on the side of partnering. We're a very partnership-centric organisation, both Channel 5 and Viacom at large. And we've got lots of irons in the fire with each of the FAANGs. They're all quite different. They bring quite different things to the party.
And just briefly, do you want to tell everyone what you do and what your kind of interactions with the FAANGs are? Oh,
sure, yeah. So I look after the sort of commercial and operational side of Channel 5. That includes our direct-to-consumer AVOD service, My5, and the Milkshake spin-off of that. And so, I mean, each of the FAANGs we deal with actually almost on a day-to-day basis. So we'll work with Facebook around marketing. We'll work with Amazon around distribution. We'll work with Apple around app distribution. They're very important parts of our ecosystem, and we like to work with them on a positive basis.
And because you're very partnership focused, does that mean that at this point in time you don't really feel a competitive threat from the FAANGs?
We absolutely compete with, particularly Facebook and Google for advertising revenue. That's something we obviously share in common with the TV industry at large. But we're not afraid of competition. Competition is actually a good thing. We want that competition to be fair and conducted on a level playing field. So there are some agendas that we have to make sure that emerges. But there's no sense, there's no presumption that we must keep everything the same as it is. We have to keep pushing forward. The consumer demands it, and we need to meet that.
And again, I get the sense that you'll see these relationships as not fixed or stable. They're still developing all the time.
I don't think any relationships with anyone are fixed in this environment. You have to constantly reevaluate, how best to move your business forward. When what kinds of deals you strike, what sort of partnerships you seek. But that applies to anybody that you do business with, not just the FAANGs.
Okay. Leon, I'm guessing you're going to have a very different perspective.
So my name is Leon Siotis. I'm GM Revenue for Europe for SpotX. SpotX is the ad tech arm of RTL Group. So similar, I guess, to the group so far. It's a pretty complicated relationship, and depending what part of the business you're in, you will compete or partner in very different ways. coming from the ad tech arm, we're probably the most alarmist within the group, so to say, and probably compete the most head-on. But of course, if you look at Fremantle or our MPNs with StyleHall, they'll kind of be much more collaborative with the broadcasters, probably kind of in the middle, trying to straddle both sides at the moment.
But when, as SpotX,
Yes.
do you go into broadcasters saying, if you work with Google rather than me, you are essentially doing a deal with the devil?
100%. Yes, we do, and we're strong believers of that.
Right.
It seems we've seen what's happened across the board, and TV is really kind of the last stronghold here. So to let them in and let them learn how to do everything in your
Have you
environment.
made this observation to your colleagues in other parts of the RTL empire?
But as we said, everybody has their own, their own agendas, their own targets, their own incentives. So it's very hard when you're running such a large business, and the FAANGs represent so many different areas. It's not a.
So they're basically
it's simple.
ignoring you.
Exactly. So
Okay.
complicated.
Gary, different perspective again, I'm guessing. Tell us what you do.
Absolutely. So I am responsible for strategic development at All3Media International. So we are the sales and distribution business of the All3Media Group, which I think is currently the leading independent producer in the UK. We're owned by Discovery and Liberty Global. So what I do on a day-to-day basis is I'm across our divisional strategy, but I'm also responsible for our digital products. So what we're trying to do more and more. We'll always be a B2B sales business that makes up the vast majority of our revenues, and we work with the FAANGs on that basis for co-production, for selling content to them. But we also have started to work with our library to do some more sort of direct-to-consumer activity, and again, we then benefit from the infrastructure that these guys have built.
So you presumably don't think that you're doing a deal with the devil. You see a fantastic opportunity for All3 to grow and develop its business, make more money, engage with audiences, test things.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's balanced, though, John. I mean, I think, we've got a number of loyal broadcaster customers around the world. We work very closely with ITV, with Channel 4, with Channel 5, and we value those relationships. So it's not saying that the answer to all production funding is Amazon and Netflix. There's an approach for each different show.
But babe, as Richard was suggesting earlier in his presentation, it's a huge new source of money into the market for companies like
it certainly is. And, there's ways that we can collaborate to actually bring that money on screen with our traditional broadcast partners as well. So, for example, ITV at the moment is trailing The Widow.
Okay.
So The Widow is a co-production with Amazon. Bringing that Amazon money in will bring talent like Kate Beckinsale, which on a, to be fair, on a single domestic commission, you're not going to do.
All right. Matt, now you're in a very different position again, because you have essentially married and are sleeping with Leon's devil. Is that broadly right?
Wow. I imagine the devil's quite the lover. I would say I would maybe not quite
Tell everyone who you are and what you do first.
Not quite that extreme. So I started a business called Diagonal View, and I sold it 2 years ago, almost to the day, to Sky. Diagonal View started as a company making videos for the internet in 2008. There were two of us. 3 to 6 months later, we had as many viewers as you remember, as iPlayer at the time, going back to 2008, 2009, and then really stopped looking at the big numbers and the massive audience reach and more looking at audiences and communities. And then social media started to look at video, so we were at that time the number 1 and 2 channels on MySpace. That's going back to like 09, 10, but really, rather than thinking again of reach, it was around conversation and how social media was interacting with video content. And so when then YouTube became YouTube and really started that marriage of social meets content, as well as Facebook started to then allow videos to be shared, that's when we really hit our stride, particularly in covering the conversation around Premier League football. And so when I started speaking with Sky, it was around, we have a conversation where specifically we have a global audience talking about football. We didn't have the rights, obviously, as I was funding the company myself. It would have been great if we did, but we didn't. And I think the marriage as it's set up was contemplated on global audience and conversation versus more localized rights and a leadership position in the UK around football. I think in the past 2 years, what we've learned is that the commercialization of that actually is quite productive. And I think where some of the questions since I've been in attendance have been around how you make money or what is the relationship with the customer. The content actually does drive a very active conversation with the customer. And I think when we talk about or think about ownership, it's that conversation
that is the ownership of the emotional engagement, right? And so in the past, we might have thought about, you need a head end to get broadcast to the customer's home, or you need a set-top box, or you need great content from your production partners. The truth is, the person who owns that conversation on a one-to-one basis or one-to-many basis actually is an incredibly powerful space. And so what we've done is, and I can give some examples of how we work with Sky on making more money out of that, but also deepening that conversation with our constituents.
And just briefly, and probably to extend this marriage metaphor to Breaking Point and beyond, as a partner, they essentially own the keys to the car and the house. They manage all the bank accounts and basically decide what you get to do at home, with whom, when, where, and why. In other words, they've got all the power in this relationship from your point of view. Is that fair?
Who is they in that sense?
I'm thinking about the internet platforms you've built the Diagonal View business on.
Yeah. So to some extent. So let's start with the keys. I think the keys are probably the most controversial piece. So prior to acquisition by Sky, we were a very small business, say about 50 people. And one of the platforms took down, this is mid-negotiation after 9 years of work, took down our #1 channel. Right? Our #1 channel is called All Time 10s. They took it off their platform for no good reason. Now, they may have had troubles with security issues. I don't want to use the H word. They may have said, gee, this content isn't respectable. They may have had a litany of excuses to take down our #1 property as we reached 30 days prior to acquisition. Stressful time. So this is a property, All Time 10s is watched by millions of people at that point a day. It's a household name, certainly in English language across the US and the UK, and it's no longer on air. What do I do? Small business. This is when the Fifth Estate becomes very helpful, and we happen to have a long-standing relationship, myself on a personal level, and then us as a company with the FT. So I call the FT and I say, this has just happened. Within hours, that channel's back on.
But essentially, you had to bring in mediators to resolve.
I wouldn't call it a mediator.
Maybe
that'd be a very stretched example of a mediator. I had to put down the hammer.
Let's dump the marriage metaphor and move swiftly on.
I think the keys, you asked about the keys and the cash. The keys are the bigger issue. And I think since 2 years ago, we've learned through Brexit, Trump, whatever it may be, those keys are in the hands of quite culpable and unregulated parties.
Okay, we'll come back to that point, I'm sure. Let's jump on. So I run a consulting company, and therefore we like to categorize things. And I thought a sort of helpful starting point into this discussion might be to try and categorize the different buckets of opportunity that the FAANGs present for UK TV businesses. James, it sounds like you've got lots of different touch points. How do you think about it? Is it 4 or 5 different discrete things which have different touch points with Viacom and Channel 5?
I don't think we think about it the way you might, John.
Okay. We should talk later.
Yeah. I suppose top of mind for me in terms of the role that the FAANGs can play in our business is route to market.
Right.
So whether that's reaching a set of consumers that would otherwise be expensive or difficult to reach, or speeding the route to market for new initiatives and products that we might want to launch.
Both in the UK and outside of the UK, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, for Channel 5, clearly we're very focused on the UK market, but for Viacom more widely, absolutely any market which Viacom's active in, which is pretty much all of them, the FAANGs would be a partner in assisting with that.
So I'm going to try and categorise it. Is it basically distribution, tech, marketing, and money?
Yeah, okay, let's go with that.
Okay. Does that broadly characterise it? I mean, Leon, does that make sense to you from an RTL, SpotX point of view?
Completely. I would say, marketing and money, as far as things like co-productions, are probably from my perspective, the least damaging of that. Once you start to step into the technology and then potentially distribution, you're starting to kind of feed that competitive beast that could, I would say, in a couple of years, come back to bite you. But great, big platforms. There's a lot of tools there that you can utilize, and if you can use them to your advantage, you should in the near term.
Okay, let's jump on and talk about the next thing. So the whole FAANG acronym is a slightly odd thing. in that these are incredibly different, diverse businesses. Janine, if you had to point at one of them, which one would you say is the single most important for your business, given what you do?
Given what I do is different to what is probably
Of course, your
important
colleagues
to
do different
ITV
things.
as a whole.
Who do you spend your most time thinking about and working with?
Me, personally, it's probably what is our relationship with Facebook.
Right. Why Facebook?
Because that is one of the relationships that isn't as advanced as the other ones.
Right.
And we're still finding our way with that one.
And
obviously, they're now putting a lot of prioritization onto their watch platform,
Sure.
and therefore they're coming in through a commissioning arm that traditionally the charge had been led by the Netflix of this world. So right now, that is the relationship that I guess is in the most flux. So that is the one that's taking up a lot of our time, whereas our more established relationships, like our relationship with Apple, across the hub and across apps and stuff, is a lot more, and podcast is a lot more kind of solid, and we're much further down the line. Same with YouTube. We have our commercial terms, we know what we're doing there, we make a profit.
Right.
But yeah, Facebook is
Okay.
much more flux.
James, who's most important to you?
Ebbs and flows, depending on
Right.
what we've got cooking. So
Who's rising and falling?
So I think, I definitely agree with Janine that Facebook is an important partner for us, or one we're spending a lot of time working with. So the launch of Facebook Watch, MTV Stacks was one of the original shows that they commissioned. So we want to sort of renew that partnership, push it forward. But I guess as alongside that, and not necessarily kind of on a lower priority, but alongside it. Working with Amazon to build our More Milkshake SVOD service that we launched a year or so ago. So it really is parallel tracks.
Got you, so it's very varying.
Yeah.
Okay. Leon, I'm guessing from your point of view, it's Google, 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 Google.
Yeah, and it's also the company that we do the most partnering with, beyond Compete, of course, but also, Google seems to be leading the pack with, I think, some of the Amazons of the world starting to partner in different ways.
Gary?
I think it depends which team. I mean, for me
Right.
personally, Amazon's important because we have an Amazon channel in the States, we have an EST business with Amazon in multiple territories, and of course, they're a co-production business. That's my side now, but we're very involved in that. So
If you look at direct benefit or ROI or cash, which FAANG do you make the most money from?
I don't think we've ever added it up, John, to be honest. I mean, it varies because things go through different routes, and I guess that's the other point is, okay, we don't see Facebook necessarily as a video partner at the moment, but I do license rights to our content to other suppliers that are on Facebook Watch. So some of it comes indirectly. So I don't think we're really equipped to sort of give you an answer to that.
Okay, dodged. Matt?
Well, I think our FAANG is more of a fanny, if I look at it, because if you kind of take the nose to tail example, the nose is Facebook and the Y is YouTube.
Right.
And so I'm not speaking in a derogatory way about any of the members of the acronym, but I think probably we're similar in terms of growth, and if they were a more responsive partner, probably Facebook would be more interesting. They probably are going through a time of change. We have to be sort of sympathetic to their situation, whether it's self-inflicted or not. Right? We're in a place of medical health. Whether or not that injury came through self-infliction or through people on the platform who have done bad things, to us, Facebook's a pretty volatile place at the moment. And this is speaking as diagonal view. But I think also when I look at it more generally, it's difficult to necessarily get a meaningful conversation there, either from a content or a commercial perspective. Whereas YouTube is a much more stable platform, has been a place for us since 2008 where we can have a consistent audience, consistent conversation, feel like our content is in a safer place. They probably do 60 to maybe 65% of the work in terms of content ID, whereas other platforms probably wouldn't be at that level.
I mean, if you think about, one obvious difference between these businesses is that Netflix essentially at the moment has one core business and product, so your interactions with it are quite restricted, whereas Google and to some extent Amazon are massive, multi-tentacled, sprawling beasts with their fingers in lots and lots and lots of different pies. Is that presumably reflected in how important they are? I mean, James, that presumably is a big consideration.
Yeah, although I don't think we look at everything on its merits. So with Amazon, obviously, in common with probably every other broadcaster, we're a big customer for AWS. I mean, you know, sort of simple vendoring of infrastructure services. That, you know, but that's not that decision or that you know, that choice to work with them among other cloud providers is made without reference to whether they're an important distribution partner for our applications.
My sense is, certainly talking to clients, that it does cause anxiety that we're doing a deal with them over here, but in doing that deal, I'm a bit worried that we're letting them know stuff here, and that probably gives them some advantage over there because they're coming in at it from all sorts of different directions. I mean, Leon, I don't know, when you talk to clients, is that something that you bump up against?
100%. And then you also have to start thinking about our decisions. You know, if you think Google or Facebook, they're going to start making decisions based on the regulatory environment. And those decisions may have nothing to do with the way that you work with them. However, it could impact your business dramatically, right? If the walls just continue to go up because they're afraid of privacy concerns, they're not doing it to take, you know, ad revenue away from you, or they're not doing it for this, but that reason ultimately impacts your kind of day-to-day business. So therefore, as you said, the pure size of the companies is concerning for that. And yes, of course, as you mentioned, you know, they are data beasts. So if you're feeding that, and even if it's not necessarily directly impacting you today, you know, the learnings that they're gathering will probably impact you down the road.
Yeah, I think the learnings piece, rather than just like a data stack, is what we've seen over. I've been in digital media for 20 years, and large companies struggle processing data down to a meaningful data set. And John's heard me talk in the past about kind of the hierarchy of content in terms of information, and then knowledge, and then wisdom. And I think that wisdom layer, and that's a quote from early last century, it's T.S. Eliot, that wisdom layer is in extraordinary scarcity with the broader the stack. Whereas us as a producer have a really engaged and highly motivated relationship with the audience. So motivated from both sides. They want to see stuff that's really cool, and they want us to engage more deeply. We want them to see cool stuff and engage more deeply. And I think that kind of multi-node approach is actually incredibly valuable. And I think that the stack of information and being a generalist is valuable. If I look at the piece across the FAANGs and kind of how we think about the value of that handshake, if we're getting more valuable information than they're getting, not just a stack of information, but valuable information, then it's working in our favor. So it's not just a P&L, but a balance sheet piece, because knowledge builds value. The second piece is across the FAANG, that some of those businesses right now are just using the internet for distribution, right? They're not creating a conversation. Probably think more interesting than the Apple announcement earlier this week is the Netflix announcement of more interactive content. So instead of just absorbing our knowledge base and producing content back out, which is kind of like a market stall, they're actually going to start an iterative approach at the time of the conversation or the content being kind of broadcast. And that piece, to me, that iterative approach is really the angle. It's probably the most interesting angle over the past year or two.
Okay. Let's jump on a bit and talk about success, the good stuff. So I'd love you each to give us an example of a really fantastically successful project that you've done with a FAANG. And just in the context of your organization, what made it so great? You know, what does good look like from a context of, say, ITV?
I mean, we've had loads of different successes, you know, right from, you know, our ITV Hub example being used in an Apple keynote address, you know, from their information.
And did you see a spike?
Yeah, it came on, yeah, absolutely. We saw, you know, and it was prominent right in the middle of the screen, and lots of people got really excited about that. But, you know, it's down to kind of some of the smaller things that we're doing for the first time. So, Love Island, I'm going to talk about that because you never do a presentation without mentioning it. This year, Love Island's on in the US for the first time on CBS this summer, which is quite a big thing. But part of that is that we've launched a Love Island store on Amazon in the US. The shop, the show's not on air yet, but the store's live, and we've done that with Amazon as a new kind of initiative to experiment on that. And the global business, I think, working with partners like that. You know, ITV produced Queer Eye. No one knows that because Netflix gets the halo effect of that, not ITV. You know, those kind of big international successes, I think, are really exciting for us. So it's not just about what we have in the UK, but how we take that and multiply it across territories. And because those FAANGs have got such big footprints in those territories, it makes it a really exciting time.
And Love Island is really interesting to me because it has a touch point with every one of these businesses.
Absolutely.
I think you've even sold old series of Love Island
Yeah,
to Netflix now.
you can watch it on Netflix, Hulu.
And would you argue that the FAANGs made a material difference to the success of the Love Island project?
Yes, I would say in some respects. So there's the kind of marketing angle that we have with people like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. There's no denying that we took a different approach for Love Island than we do normally, and that's partly, and we were talking about this while we were having coffee earlier, it's partly to do with the audience of Love Island and their appetite for those kind of platforms, as well as the content that we had. And we made the decision to release some of our best content during the day before the show goes out, which was kind of counterintuitive for a lot of our production teams. They're like, no, don't show them that, because then they'll never watch the show. But actually what we found was by putting that out there, the opposite happened.
In a sense, what you're saying is that, for a modern broadcaster, these kinds of relationships are critical to driving the success.
The audiences exist on those platforms, and if we want to market our programs and protect the primacy of our broadcast, we have to at least be playing on those platforms to some degree.
James, most successful project?
Well, the one I'd choose probably just to give a flavour of how we can work with the FAANGs is the launch of More Milkshake, our preschool SVOD service, launched about a year ago. It's an Amazon channel, which gave us basically a route to market that was quicker, easier, and allowed us to sort of test the water with a brand that hitherto had been a pure free-to-air proposition. It's doing incredibly well. Its growth is outstripping other channels in its category, and we're learning a lot about how content can drive customer acquisition, churn reduction, and so on.
And your subscriber take was being driven by?
Obviously the brand itself, the Milkshake brand itself is a big part of the piece, but because we partner with Amazon to launch this channel, their various opportunities to merchandise that channel across their estate absolutely helps bring customers in. Okay.
Leon, have you had any successful experiences working with a FAANG?
Of course we have.
Right.
I would say, in the context of RTL, Deutschland 83 is probably a great example of it, where, in-house production, launched in Germany, although we had very high expectations for it, it wasn't necessarily that successful domestically, but then gained a ton of success internationally, and we still believed in the project. And season 2, Deutschland 86, is a co-production with Amazon, and Amazon's kind of distributing that along with other kind of local broadcasters in different countries. So, it's enabled us to kind of, have a second season of something that we really did believe in, thanks to, the tools that they had. So, there's that, and I'm sure there's, many other examples.
Gary, most successful project?
Yeah, I guess it depends how you look at the business. If you look at our sort of traditional content funding and production, there's a number of co-productions you could point to with Amazon, with Netflix, that have gone global and have gone global quickly because of that. You look at format production, you take a show like The Circle, which was Channel 4 here, that's now Netflix will do a local production, I think in Brazil, France and the US, so that's fantastic for us. If I look at my side of the business and what we're developing, piecing together all of these FAANGs to produce something like our inside-outside SVOD service in the US. We use Facebook for our primary marketing and ways to speak to consumers, because the benefit of having Amazon channels is, yes, you reach a lot of people really quickly and they have the billing details, but we have no interaction with those fans. So we rely on Facebook for that. We're available on Amazon, we're available on Android, we have a YouTube channel. So it's sort of piecing together your own ecosystem, your own business from all of these businesses.
And Matt, quick example, most successful project, but
I think
what does good look like?
The piece here that's interesting is the delivered with or on. We don't, as Diagonal View, really deliver with any of the FAANGs. We deliver on. Obviously, as Sky collaborates with these businesses every day.
Sure.
Incredibly successful partnerships, and it's fascinating to see how that works, and works very, very well. But as Diagonal View, I think in terms of on these platforms, a piece that we did probably starting just over a year ago, that it was, I think, an incredibly cool use of it's kind of social meets video, is the video platforms themselves really saw a competing space in live. And I spoke here at this event 2 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago, and live was this kind of last preservation of TV. Wow, live. Well, Rupert Murdoch sold his entire empire except for live, sport and news. He's a pretty smart guy. Gee, that seems like a good play. Bang, FAANGs are now in the live business, whether it's Amazon in tennis, I'm not going into the detail, but et cetera, et cetera. They're all into live. So you imagine me walking into Sky in Austerley, social media kid, not kid, but guy, and saying what we'd love to do is a parallel live broadcast of the Premier League in our own way. So on Facebook and on YouTube simultaneous while you're showing it on telly. You've spent a few billion, I get that, but hey, that money's spent, can't get it back. What more could we do with it? And so what we did is laid down with products called the Watch Along, which is our well-known social dudes and girls watching football while the game is on. The way I watch it, and there's a few 100,000 people watching it at the same time simultaneously, so we actually put that, so I put my phone there with my Facebook feed while I have my laptop streaming the game. And I shut the volume off on the laptop, so I take down the more traditional feed, and I have these nutters yelling at the game. Now, there's a few things that are cool to that. One is that Parent Co. allowed us to do it at all, frankly. Second piece is we do that, we pay for that directly via our own sponsorship. So rather than one of the FAANGs cutting a partial check or bringing the sponsor, we did it ourselves. 3, the audience that's on there, and you imagine the threat of a second screen if you're a big TV company, especially if you get paid most of your money through subscriptions. So you're like, what's this second screen thing, and how do we get people to avoid that? Well, now we have them engaged on both. Sorry,
it's a great example of how embedded these companies are becoming in the TV ecosystem. I want to jump us on quickly because we're running slightly short of time. And there were 2 questions I thought we should just discuss briefly before we head for coffee. So number 1, Matt, you referenced this earlier, the practical realities of managing a relationship with a huge global business can be quite daunting at times. I know, Gary, if you want to start off on this one, when something goes wrong, who do you pick up the phone to?
I mean, the thing that we've found at the moment with all of these businesses is that there are multiple touch points. They equally haven't joined all the dots yet. I'm sure there's data scientists in the back looking at all this, but the person who runs the EST business at these platforms doesn't run the SVOD, doesn't run the App Store. So you've got multiple touch points, and trying to get something done, it can be a struggle. It's about building those relationships as you traditionally would.
And do you have a sort of system of relationship managers who deal with those different touch points?
Yeah, exactly. So the person who runs our EST business for me won't know the person who runs Amazon Prime's SVOD. Yeah, and they have those relationships.
And James, from your point of view, I'm guessing you've got colleagues back in the US who are managing global relationships. You're here in the UK dealing with different relationships. How do you manage it?
Yeah, so we have strong local relationships, each of the FAANGs. And I think the key to it is constant communication. So we meet regularly, to kind of review how we're getting on, what we can do that's new, what we can fix that's not working as well as we'd like. So it's a genuine partnership in that level, in that respect. In terms of that global thing, yes, absolutely. Sort of ICOM HQ has got sort of very big, kind of framework kind of relationships that set the tone for local businesses. But the UK in particular is such an important market that we have to have that local connection.
Okay, let's do the final quick question before we break. Lots of the same people who know that Donald Trump is a Russian stooge and Putin is responsible for Brexit also know that ultimately these people want your budgets. They are coming for your money. They want your subscribers, they want your ad bucks, they want your audience, they want their attention, their time, they want everything. And that everything that's happening is just a precedent to that moment when they suddenly emerge as massive competitors. Janine, do you broadly buy that?
Up to a point. I mean, this is not necessarily our official activity.
No, speaking purely personally.
Purely within the world of where I deal. We have seen, they want to work with us. There's a positivity there, and through the commissioning relationships, through the co-productions, and
sure.
through those relationships that we build. But yes, there is no doubt that there is, if you go to the advertising sales floor, a massive competition for eyeballs, for those revenues, for P&G's money, or for their next campaign. Oh, sorry, my microphone's come off. So
Did anyone hear that?
probably not.
You could hear it. Oh, okay. Your voice is carried. Your CEO stood up at the Future TV Ad Forum in December, and basically her key message was threat, 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 threat. Obviously, very necessary evil, but is it basically threat?
It's basically on the advertising sales side, but part of what we have to do now and what we've done is try and diversify our revenues to take things like that into account. So we have our direct-to-consumer business. We sold 6 million quid's worth of Love Island water bottles. We've got events. We're doing as much as we can to broaden, what we do. We're launching an SVOD. We're doing all those things to try and, make that threat as less impactful if we possibly can.
I'm worried that the response is selling Love Island water bottles, but
No,
we'll come back.
it was an example.
I'm teasing. James,
6 million is good.
Ultimately, if you think long term, by the time we draw to the end of the 2020s, is this much more about threat than opportunity?
I think I said at the beginning, there's definitely competition there, but we shouldn't be afraid of competition. It's definitely incumbent on us as an industry to develop new lines of business, new products that meet that competitive threat. So, Sky AdSmart, addressable advertising generally. But the other thing I think that is very important is that competition's on a level playing field. There are disparities in the way advertising is regulated between broadcast and online that are unhelpful to consumers, let alone our business interests. And then as a public service broadcaster, we need to make sure that the contribution that we make to the UK creative industries, to the UK consumers is discoverable and kind of consumable easily and prominently.
But today you're basically fighting Mike Tyson with one hand tied behind your back.
On the regulation front, we think there are changes that should be forthcoming. We're obviously happy that the DCMS has announced a review of online advertising. So there's definitely progress there.
Leon, you talked about doing a deal with the devil. Are we all in purgatory and heading to hell?
I mean, I hope not. Look, I think on the advertising side, clearly, it's extremely competitive and will continue to be so. Of course, we do partner. They're huge buyers. They have a lot of technology on the buy side as well. But if they control the distribution, and then eventually, if you start looking at on the content side, Netflix, who I have I have absolutely nothing to do with, of course. When we're talking about data and the ability to kind of really understand what people like, what people are watching, and then they start moving that into the kind of content side of things, which would arguably, at the moment, is the most collaborative.
Okay.
Then I could see that as getting a little more competitive as well.
Gary, you're basically an arms dealer, as in you're happy to sell to whoever, presumably.
Yes and no. I mean, I think what we have to remember is that content is our lifeblood, and that the people that commission the most content from us are the UK TV broadcasters. Today. But it's incredibly important that ecosystem continues to thrive. Now, if we look at the international side of that, well, if we can get a program to scale quickly and the money's on the table, then that's great because the broadcasters participate in that back end. If I can get a longer shelf life out of a piece of content by launching long tail SVODs, then again, the broadcasters can benefit from the long tail, they produce a net of that. Okay.
Matt, final quick word. Ultimately, are we all deluding ourselves? Is it about threat more than...
No doubt. This is my own personal experience with Diagonal View, so rather than a corporate piece from Sky. The analogy I make is that they want us to be potato farmers. And the reason they want us to be potato farmers is we each have our small allotment of potato farms. So even if you're all three and your allotment's slightly bigger than my allotment as Diagonal View, you're still a potato farmer. The kingdom can come and say, that's my potato farm, and knock you out. If we created a potato cooperative, it'd be more of a hassle for them. If we had our own empire that could fight them, it would be a massive problem. But what they want is a lot of very small, very healthy potato farms that help feed the empire.
That's a wonderful way to end. So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it, the future of the UK TV industry. You can sell Love Island water bottles, you can deal arms, or you can be a sharecropper or potato farmer on the Google plantation. Wow. Let's go for coffee. Thank you to our panel.